Philosophy, religion, and God. There is perhaps no greater influence on one's views of oneself and one's destiny than the choice between belief and unbelief. Believers often see themselves as humans transcending nature, while non-believers hold that nature is all there is. The basic question of chapter is, how reasonable is religion? Defining religion. What is religion? Not all the religions have a belief in God, and some have a few, if any, religion beliefs. Some have institutionalized ritual, others little ritual. Some religious focus on commitment, others do not. Ninian Smart suggests that religious have 6 dimensions: doctrine, experience of, or emphasis on events in which the believer feels the presence of the supernatural; myth, ritual, morality, organization. In the chapter we will concentrate on doctrine and experience. Religious belief, religious experience, and theology. Religious beliefs refers to attitudes toward the doctrines of religion about the universe. On the other hand, religious experience refers to experience of the supernatural. We will look at both aspects of religion. We should not confuse the philosophy of religion with theology. While theology, the rational study of God, generally assumes God exists, of the philosophy of religion does not. Theism is a belief in personal God who is creator of the world and present in its process, and with whom we might come into contact. Monotheism theism is the belief that there is only one such God. While many religious believers need no proof of monotheism, the development of scientific rationality has led many others to question and believe in God, and to seek for evidence for the belief. Arguments for God's existence are one source of such evidence. The ontological argument. The ontological argument is the argument for the existence of God, based just on reasons and no facts about the universe. And the arguments of the existence of God deduce from the idea we have of God. The argument first made by St. Anselm in the Prologium moves from the minds idea of the God's greatest being. We can conceive to God's actual existence. Roughly, if God were only to exist in our minds as an idea, then we could conceive of something greater, a God that actually exists. Hence, God must exist. Objections to Anselm. A number of objections to Anselm arguments that have been made, the most famous being the proposed that Immanuel Kant object to the argument of the grounds that is confessed concept and reality of existence. He claimed the actual existence is not a predicate like other properties, such as God's being perfectly good, and thus that one cannot deduce God's actual existence from any concept of God. The cosmological argument. Aquinas and the chain of motion. Cosmological arguments proceed from the facts about the universe or conforms to claims about God's existence. Aquinas offered 5 such proofs for the existence of God, but the text only examines 2, the arguments from motion and the arguments from causation. In the first argument, Aquinas began with the observation that things in the universe are moving, that this is the movement must have been begun by the first mover, which must, unlike anything else in the universe, this what we mean by God. Aquinas' second cosmological argument starts by nothing, that the things in the universe are caused, and this chain of causation must start somewhere with a being who is uncaused. This being is God. Objection to Aquinas. The objection of Aquinas is drawn from Newton's law of motion, which shows that it is interfered with a moving object that will keep moving on its own indefinitely. But Aquinas could say that his argument is supposed to apply the initiation of movement. Another object is that the argument does not show the existence of the Christian God. Aquinas could accept this and note that it just limits the scope of his argument to do so. Another objection is that Aquinas merely assumes that there could not have been an infinite regress. But why make this assumption? However, if Big Bang Theory is correct, there was a starting point, but this does not show that God started it. Hume challenged Aquinas' argument by holding that the chain of causes could be accounted for fully by giving an account of each link within it. Another objection is that we could hold that God was cause. Aquinas could respond by holding that everything in the universe has cause, but that God is within it. The design argument. This is also known as the teleological argument, that the argument moves from the claim that the universe exhibits intelligent design to the claim that there must then be some intelligent designer, namely God, the divine watchmaker. The classical example of this argument was offered by William Paley, who argued that as the design of which implied the existence of a watchmaker, so the design found in natural organism, his example is the eye, implied the existence of a divine agency. Objections to the design argument. Paley's argument is the argument by analogy and so it depends on the terms of analogy being relevantly similar. David Hume pointed out, however, that while we have experienced the making of artifacts such as watches, we have no such experience of the eyes or indeed the whole cosmos. Hume also pointed out the complex order can be produced by intelligent or less than supremely intelligent being. A particularly powerful objection arose from Darwin's theory of evolution, which could explain even the design of the eye on the basis of natural selection, a purely natural process. But some believers hold that natural selection is the process that the Creator uses to design and produce life. However, critics of this view note that the process of natural selection is not intelligently directed but random. William A. Dembski argues that the special complexity of living organisms can only be explained by intelligent design such as complexity, which heat term specified complexity exhibits directedness to goals and can only be explained by an intelligent being. Thus, because genes have specified complexity, since they are merely random assemblies of molecules, they must be produced by an intelligence. Paul Davies and the others developed a new version of the design argument known as the fine-tuning argument. The fine-tuning argument starts from the notion that life and consciousness are only possible given narrow range of conditions, namely those specified by our physical laws and constants such as gravity. Had matter been differently configured, there would be no life or consciousness. Thus, the universe seems to have been designed so that as makes sure that human life or something like it could have been involved in it. The objections raised to proofs of God's existence have led many to hold the beliefs in the traditional God as reasonable. Atheism. Atheism denies the major claims of all varieties of theism. Modern atheists tend to agree that the scientific method is the best approach to gain reliable knowledge of the world around us. Thus, many atheists also tend to be materialists. Finally, some atheists are attracted to utilitarianism, which focuses on the maximization of happiness. However, the central feature of atheism is the view that there are good reasons to believe that God does not exist. The most influential reasons for not believing in God are found in the so-called problem of evil. The problem of evil. How is evil compatible with all-powerful Creator? Hume, in the voice of the character Philo, argues that the experience of world argues against the existence of all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good being. Hume here might be proposing the logical problem of evil, that the existence of evil cannot be logically squared with belief that God is omniscient, omnipotent, and unbelievable, that there is contradiction. However, Hume might also be read as making an inductive problematic argument that given the fact of evil, God is, as we traditionally conceive of God, probably does not exist. The argument raises that what is known as the evidential problem of evil, and arguments arising from it, while conceding that God could possibly exist. It is logically contradictory. Contend that God exists is improbable. Augustine argued that evil existed because the evil was a lack, and since anything that was not God lacked something, anything that was not God must necessarily lack some good. But why does God allow such absence of good? Another response is to claim that human freedom is the cause of evil, but this does not account for natural disaster. John Hick argues that a world in which beings can mature as free and responsible beings must include real dangers and sorrows, and so since the development of humans into such being is desirable, the world must contain dangers and sorrow. Agnostics, such as Thomas Huxley, say that don't know objectively whether or not God exists or not, so we should suspend judgment on the matter. Why do so many people believe God is if it is unclear whether he exists? Freud suggests that people believe because they have infantile need to believe that someone is looking after them, but it is not clear that there is any way of proving this claim. Why is believing Kant's view? Kant believed that because the world unjust, we should just pursue one that is just, and the obligates us to believe in God who can bring about such a world. But although we might believe that God exists, we cannot know that he does for a reason Kant offers. Religious beliefs. Even if existence of God is not an issue for a person, the questions of whether belief in divine dimension might be. Is the universe something sacred, something divine? The answer to the question of whether we can know God exists inconclusive, but the question of choosing to believe in a divine dimension is not. The will to believe. William James confronted the issue. He held that under certain conditions it is both rational and moral to believe in someone without adequate evidence for the belief. Such would be the case when we are faced with an option that is living force and momentous, for such options cannot be their nature be decided on intellectual grounds, and so they arise. We can choose on the basis of our interests, emotions, desires, and so on. Such an option is the option of whether to adopt a religious belief. Personal experience of the divine. Many people who believe in God do so they claim because they have experienced in a religious dimension of reality. There are many types of religious experience and reports of those experiences. James argues that more of their experiences share the feature of infallibility. Rudolf Otto used the term numerous experience to characterize experience of God as amazing, terrifying, but mysterious, as something we feel ourselves to infinitely depend on, and we feel unworthy before. The philosopher Stephen Davis has formulated an argument for God's existence based on such experiences. However, the claim that people have direct experiences of the divine can be questioned. Central Kirkland's thought is the distinction between the objective and subjective thinking. The objective thinker adopts the position of the observer, while the subjective thinker is passionately involved in the truth and is preoccupied with the questions of life and death. He asserts that not all life's concerns are within the purview of objective thinking, including religion. For Kierkegaard, God cannot be known as he is not the subject of objective thinking. As such, Kierkegaard discusses the leap of faith, the decision to commit to relationship with God that goes beyond rational analysis. Feminist theology. Many feminists challenge the traditional Western concepts of God, with one of their most important objections being that God's portrayed as being male and is associated with the practices and the oppressive to women. For example, many major religions still refuse to ordain women priests merely daily. For example, argues that men have used God to justify to maintain the power over women rather than trying to reform traditional religion. Daily holds the feminists who seek a religious dimension in their lives should instead find meaning in the goddess. Buddhism offers a different non-theistic approach to religion based on their four non-noble truths. These truths possess experiences characterized by suffering and being unsatisfactory to some degree. There are several differences between Eastern and Western thoughts. First, Eastern thinkers have not been as concerned with debating God's existence as Western thinkers have, and they have not been concerned to outline a moral law that is a duty to obey. Also, while Western thought has been aimed at aligning us with our Creator, Eastern thought has been aimed in grounding us in what is real.